Hi, and welcome to Chapter 4, Reducing Environmental Triggers. You'll recall that the theme has been that genetics leads to a predisposition to autoimmune disease, but it's the environment that triggers the onset of immune system dysfunction, and that in turn leads to autoimmune self-attack. In the last chapter, I spoke quite a bit about the different triggers, about foods and toxins and microbials, and how they can be triggers to the immune system and to autoimmunity. There is one key area where most of our exposure to the environment comes from, and that is the gastrointestinal tract. The gastrointestinal tract is essentially a huge tube from top to bottom, and it is actually technically outside of the body. This little graphic on the bottom left tries to make this apparent, where you see that essentially it's open space from the mouth to the bottom, and inside this tube, what we call the lumen of the tube, is essentially outside of the body. So the inner lining of the gastrointestinal tract is essentially the same as the skin on the surface of our body. But there's a big difference between our skin and the lining of the GI tract, and that is that the skin has many, many layers, with the outer layers what is called keratinized, meaning that they dry out and they form a scaly protection and are really impenetrable to many of the things that we're trying to keep out of our body. The lining of the gastrointestinal tract, on the other hand, is a very, very thin, one-cell layer thick membrane. It's only one cell layer thick, and that one cell layer extends all the way from the mouth to the bottom. The thinness of the inner lining of the GI tract is by design, because this is an area where the body is trying to absorb food and nutrients. And so the body would not be able to absorb digested food through a thick membrane like the skin, like our outer skin. It requires a very, very thin barrier. The downside of this thin layer lining the inside of the gut is that it makes us vulnerable. Because of it, the body, the real inside of the body, is more liable to be exposed to toxins within the food we eat. Then, in addition, we have 3+ pounds of bacteria living in our gut, primarily in the large intestine, and all of those bacteria only have one cell layer thick membrane and some mucus between them and the inside of our body. Finally, we have undigested and partially digested food traveling through the entire length of our GI tract, and this food, before it's fully digested, is recognized as foreign by the immune system. So if it passes through the lining of the tract undigested, then the immune system is confronted with a foreign entity, even though it's food. Because of the vulnerability of this part of our body to exposure to toxins and food and also microbials, 70 to 80% of the immune system is concentrated within the lining of the gut, just beyond this thin membrane that separates the inside of the gut and our actual tissues. Remember that all living things have cell markers that designate their origin. So our cells have cell markers that are produced by our genetics, and these indicate that they are part of this human body and also a human body. All animal and plant products similarly contain these protein markers that identify them for what they are, And if these foods are not fully digested, if they're not fully broken down to their smallest parts, then the immune system senses something foreign when they are absorbed into the body and reacts to them. Food reactions by the immune system are classified either as allergies or as sensitivities. And the difference is that a different part of the immune system is reacting to the foods. In the case of a food allergy, part of the immune system that creates a type of antibody called an IgE antibody identifies the food as foreign and then reacts with white cells that release histamine, and this creates the symptoms that are typical of an allergy: rashes, swelling, and in extreme cases, anaphylaxis. Other parts of the immune system can react to food. These include antibodies called IgG, IgM antibodies, or even cell responses, direct cell responses. And these types of reactions are generally referred to as food sensitivities. They have also been referred to as delayed onset food reactions. In an allergy, someone can react within seconds to minutes to an hour or a couple hours. In a food sensitivity reaction, the reaction can occur many hours to days after the exposure to the offending food. Food sensitivities create a wide range of symptoms that are surprising. So you can have aches and pains, numbness, brain fog, a whole slew of different symptoms, and never suspect that they are related to food because the reaction occurs a day to a couple of days after you have been exposed to the food, and so we don't naturally make the connection. We have living within our gut 3+ pounds of bacteria that we call the microbiome. Research into the microbiome has exploded in the last 10 to 15 years. We now know that the bacteria living in our gut secrete chemicals that are absorbed into the body and affect our brain, they affect our metabolism, and they affect our immune system. There are studies that show that the composition of the microbiome is different for people who have difficulty losing weight as opposed to people who don't have trouble losing weight. And the same thing has been found in many other health conditions where there is a definite influence of the microbiome on our body's general health. Things like depression, diabetes, and also autoimmune disease are impacted by who's living within our gut. The theme has been that the irritants to the immune system that lead to a dysregulation of the immune system and consequent autoimmunity are primarily foods and toxins and also microbials. Well, here in our gut, we have 3 pounds plus of bacteria. And when this bacterial population gets out of balance, then it can also become a source of infection. And some of these viruses also and parasites that are the trigger for autoimmune conditions can arise easily from an out of balance microbiome. We've seen that toxins are also a factor in triggering autoimmune conditions. And we get toxins in our body through the air we breathe, through things we put on our skin, and also to a large extent with what we drink and what we eat. Many of these toxins pass easily through the thin lining of the gastrointestinal tract and are readily absorbed into our body. They come in contact with the immune system, the largest part of the immune system within the gut itself. If we have lots of unhealthy bacteria within our microbiome in the gut, then these bacteria also secrete toxins which create reactions in the immune system and provoke an immune response, which can then lead to autoimmune reactions. When someone is predisposed to autoimmune reactions, to immune system dysfunction, and has been exposed to triggers like toxins or food sensitivities or microbial stealth infections or chronic infections, one thing that can throw people off the cliff, so to speak, is what we call leaky gut. I've talked about how we have this very thin membrane lining the inside of our gut that tries to keep things out and maintain the separation between the inside of the tube that is our GI tract and the actual body. For many of us, this inside membrane that is supposed to protect us has become leaky, and it's letting things from the lumen or the inside of our GI tract seep into the body itself. And because this portion of the body contains the largest concentration of the immune system, then leaky gut leads to a dramatic increase in reactivity of the immune system and becomes a huge factor in immune system dysregulation and consequently autoimmunity. There are a number of things that we know contribute to or cause leaky gut. These include a generally poor diet, or what we call the SAD diet, the standard American diet, which is full of processed foods and lots of sugars and starches. It also includes diets that are high in potentially antigenic foods, meaning potentially reactive foods. Gluten, for instance, would be a big culprit, but this also varies person to person. So what one person reacts to, someone else may not. Toxins in the food we eat, chemicals that are added to foods, preservatives, they also contribute to leaky gut. Toxins that are released by the microbiome, by the bacteria living inside of our gut, also contribute to leaky gut. Antibiotics, taking antibiotics or having taken antibiotics multiple times in one's life is a huge factor in leaky gut. Taking NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, contribute to leaky gut. So do other prescriptive medications. And finally, chronic stress is a huge contributor to leaky gut, as is insomnia. So it's no wonder that there are many people walking around who have different degrees of leaky gut, and this is leading to a chronic provocation or irritation of the immune system, increasing immune system reactivity, and eventually leading to autoimmune conditions. Here's just one of many research studies that make the connection between leaky gut and autoimmunity. Partners in leaky gut syndrome, intestinal dysbiosis, which means dysbiosis is disruption of the composition of the microbiome of the gut. So a disruption of the type and quantities of bacteria that are living in the gut. So this article presents the idea that disruption of the microbiome, whether by chronic stress or taking antibiotics, can lead to leaky gut syndrome, and that in turn contributes to autoimmune conditions. Here's a graphic anatomical depiction of leaky gut. On the left you have a normal gut lining, and you can see the columnar cells in the middle, the tan structures, and you can see that there's no separation between these cells. They are locked together. And then on the right side you see leaky gut, where there are spaces between these cells that are lining the gut, and that's allowing these pathogens and food particles to pass through the lining and go into the bloodstream and cause inflammation and abnormal immune reactions. Stepping back a little bit to look at the big picture, we've talked a number of times about how we need to reduce the insults to the immune system from the environment, and these are in the form of food sensitivities, toxins, and also microbials. And in this chapter, we've introduced the idea of leaky gut, which essentially opens the doorway to all of these things coming into direct contact with the immune system, the lion's share of the immune system, which actually lives within the gut. And that then causes immune system dysfunction and overreactivity, which sets the stage for autoimmune conditions. In a nutshell, the therapeutic approach of functional medicine for autoimmune conditions is right here on this page. It is to eliminate food sensitivities, to remove toxins primarily from the diet, but also toxic exposure generally, and then to manage and get rid of any stealth infections, and finally to heal the leaky gut, which is an open door to immune system dysfunction. In the next chapter, we'll look in more detail at how we achieve each of these steps.